All right, so we're going to look at building another type of glider. And this is basically what's called a trash bag glider or a tissue paper glider. And it's another way to build a type of flying device. And again, just like my other ones, we're just going to kind of wing this and just sort of take a guess at how you might build one of these just from scratch using some materials you might have laying around. So obviously I've got something to write with. I've got a pair of scissors. I've got some straws. I've got pipe cleaners. I've got some tape. I've got paper clips over here. We're just going to sort of see what we can do. So for this, you can look at the trash bag glider document that's provided in the assignment to get an idea of what these are going to look like. I'm going to build mine rather than with a trash bag. I happen to have some tissue paper, so I'm just going to grab some tissue paper and use that. Um, the one thing I will say you do need if you're using tissue paper is make sure you have a glue stick. It's way easier to attach tissue paper with a glue stick than it is with tape or anything else. So for this kind of a project, your design is what you want. You could build big rectangular wings, you could build swept wings, something like that. I'm going to kind of go for like a hang glider look. So I'm going to sort of sketch out, if I think about what a hang glider looks like, this is roughly what a hang glider might look like. Maybe spread that out, make it a little more even, stuff like that. And I look at this, this is just going to be kind of my template for what I'm going to have mine look like. So if I start grabbing some straws, I can look at it, it's like, well, hey, that straw is kind of the right length. And we'll grab another one. And once again, I'm not worried about it being perfect. I'm just sort of seeing. So let's say I do this and say those are going to be my front wings. And maybe we'll grab two more straws here and say, hey, well, maybe we can have these as our back wings. And so we get this kind of swept wing thing going on here. And then I've got to have some way to connect them. There's lots of ways you could do that. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to take a straw again, and I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to say it's like, well, I kind of want them to be the same length, so I'm just going to cut my straw right there, line it up, and I'm going to cut two lengths of straw the same length, and those are going to be kind of my connector pieces there. So from here, you can sort of see where we're going. We're gonna build this as our wing, and go from there. So our next step is to connect all of this. We've got to find some way to connect it. Now, I'm kind of lazy, so I'm going to do it the easy way. I'm going to grab this pipe cleaner, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slide my straw onto my pipe cleaner, and I look at this, and it's like, well, that looks pretty good, but I think I'm going to maybe turn this around and sort of twist it together, make it a little bigger, a little thicker. And I'll do that on both sides, just like this. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to slide this straw onto it. And you very quickly see that by doubling it up like that, it gives it a little more rigidity. Okay, so I've done that. And we're going to do the exact same thing over on this side. And you could use pipe cleaners. You could grab, anything that's got a wire. I mean, you literally just use plain old wire. If you've got a spool of wire sticking around, that would work great. If you do crafting, so maybe you have wire for making jewelry or beads, you could use that. You're just looking for something that's a little flexible but will hold a shape. And that's what's really nice about these pipe cleaners. They kind of hold a shape for us. So I'm going to come over here, do the same thing over here, slide these on, and I get this sort of oddball shape. And now I've got to have something to connect the middle. And just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab another pipe cleaner. Now, I don't think I need the whole thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut this pipe cleaner pretty much in half. And again, because I want it to be a little thicker, I'm going to fold it over and sort of double it a little bit and slide one end in there, bend it a bit, slide the other end on there. I'm gonna leave a little gap in the middle just because it gives it a little more flexibility and I can line things up the way I want it. So do the same thing with the other half of my pipe cleaner, come down to the bottom, slide it in, slide the other one in. And you can sort of see this is starting to build the frame for my glider. Now, one of the big problems we're going to have as is that this is going to want to move back and forth. So we need to connect them somehow. So I'm again going to jump back and grab another straw. And I look at this and I say, it's like, well, that's not too bad. We could work something out here. So if I think about it, I'm going to have some sort of a tail coming off this back end over here. So I'm going to leave this straw complete, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab another pipe cleaner because again, I'm looking for the easy way to do this. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to again twist it a little bit, and I'm going to slide it in here. And I'm just sort of looking at the distances, trying to decide, well, what's the easiest way that I can do to do this? So if this is about halfway, I'm going to fold it over and I'm going to wrap it around this center here. And I'm just going to twist it on. So it sort of sticks up like a little spike. And now I'm going to slide my straw right onto it. Okay. So right now this doesn't look like it's going to do a whole lot because it's all still loose. And that's the big thing to remember so far is that everything right now is loose. Remember, the pipe cleaners are just there to give you some rigidity, okay, to connect. Now we're going to jump in with good old Scotch tape. And so I'm going to grab the Scotch tape and I'm going to start at each joint and I'm going to start taping them. I'm going to start right here at the top and I'm going to kind of just wrap tape around this connection. Is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. That's not my goal. My goal is just to add enough connection here that it's not just going to fall apart on me until I get my tissue paper sort of wing sleeve over it. Okay, same thing. I'm going to grab a little bit of tape, come over to my joints. And again, I'm just going to sort of square them up so they're lined up and add just a tiny little piece of tape, wrapping it over the edge. Your goal is just to sort of tape together the straw joints so that they'll hold together until we put a cover on this wing. Because once we put the tissue paper cover on the actual wing surface, it'll hold itself together with just the tissue paper pretty easily. Okay, now over here, obviously we've got a little bit of an issue. I got to adjust this corner a little bit just to make it sort of function. And then I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to grab this tape and I'm going to line this one up and I'm going to tape it right on there, just like that. And our main goal there is again, just to connect these pieces. Okay, so what we've done with straws and pipe cleaners and some tape is we've built this frame and it's actually pretty rigid. Now, one of the cool things about this design using pipe cleaners is that because of the pipe cleaners in the middle, we can actually bend them and create dihedrals using those pipe cleaners to create the angle. And we'll go into that once we get the wings on it. So our next step is to look sort of at this back end and figure out how are we going to do a tail. So let's take a look at that real quick. So I want my tail to sort of stick out a little farther. And why do I want this? Well, I've got to build maybe some sort of a rudder or some rear wing flaps to sort of give it that balance. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, grab a trusty straw. You know, if you happen to run by a McDonald's or something, go ahead and grab a bunch of them. And I'm going to sort of think about it. If I put a whole straw on here, it's going to be way too long. And one of the things I want is I want it to bend because I want to build kind of a tail section on here. So I'm going to kind of cheat. I'm going to take my straw and I'm going to kind of look at this and say, it's like, well, I want mine to come back to here. And I'm going to take my straw and I'm going to cut it only about halfway through. Okay, so if you see that in the camera, I'm just going to try and cut just about halfway. So it's solid, but it'll flex. Okay, so it's still one piece. So hopefully you can guess what I'm about to do. We're going to grab pipe cleaner, another piece of pipe cleaner, bend it over, twist it to give it a little extra structure. And I'm going to take and I'm going to slide it into both of these spots. So this gets a little tricky because you have to kind of fold it over insert it into one, then insert it into the other. And then it's kind of hard. You just kind of worm it in there so that you get that. And then suddenly, boom, you've got a straw that will hold up at whatever angle you want it to sit at. So I'm going to leave it up like this, maybe a little bit farther back. And again, I'm going to go back to my good old fashioned Scotch tape, and I'm just going to add a little piece of Scotch tape to this joint to connect it. One thing I really want to point out is I'm not using a lot of tape. I'm using at most, half an inch to 3/4 of an inch of tape at each of these joints. You don't need to use a whole roll of tape. Now, to get this to attach to here, ideally, if you had a perfect world, your straws would just slip automatically together, but they don't because, well, they're the same size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my straw and I'm going to snip down the top of it about, half an inch. And maybe I'm going to strip down the bottom about that same distance. And then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to use that to slide this inside the other straw. That cut lets you sort of slide it in. And then suddenly, boom, you've got this ready to go. Now, I'm not going to tape this right now. Why not? Because it's going to be a lot easier to put the tissue paper on the wings if I leave this off for right now. So I'm going to pull this back off and just set it aside. And we're going to look at tissue papering the wings here. So for tissue papering the wings, it's really pretty simple. First thing you need is, well, tissue paper. You could also use a trash bag. You use plastic Walmart bags. You could even just use basic paper. If you want to use paper because it's what you have a handy, then go for it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take one layer of tissue paper. Let's throw that down there. And obviously this is a huge piece of tissue paper because it happens to be brand new. If you've got leftovers from, Christmas or a holiday, that's sitting in a closet somewhere, just grab some of that. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lay this on there, and mine happens to have a nice crease in the middle, so it's real easy to see. And what I need to do is I need to kind of build a frame that fits around my wingspan. So basically what I need is I need the size and shape of my wings. And I can do that. I'm just going to take a pen and mark roughly where it is. Once again, I am not worried about this being perfect for a couple of reasons. Okay. And I'm going to tell you what those are. So it's real hard to see, but I have marked out this. In fact, I'm going to grab myself a Sharpie and I'm going to go over that in black just so you can see it a little easier. So what I've done here, that is the outline of my wings. Okay. Real rough. It's not perfect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. But when I cut it out, I'm going to add about another full inch. Okay. And so to make my life easier, I'm just going to take this box knife and I'm going to cut these edges off. Once again, I'm not trying to go perfectly on it. In fact, I don't want to. I want there to be this extra tissue paper on the outside. And you'll see why in just a second. So I've cut that out, sort of tug, make sure all my cuts are connected in all the corners. Didn't do a super good job of that over here. Probably would have been easier if I'd used scissors. But here's what I'm left with, is this sheet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my frame, I'm going to lay it over it. And this is where your glue stick comes in, because this is going to make your life a lot easier than try and tape this in place. So I'm going to take my glue stick, move that out of the side, and this entire edge on the outside, okay, I'm going to just start adding some glue to it. I'm going to run down edges all the way through. So I'm putting this glue on the outside edge outside of the bit. And, if you go over into the main body of your plane, it's not going to hurt anything at all. That's what's really great about this kind of a model, is that it's really hard to make a big mistake. Okay. So I've done this, I've laid it out, I've glued all the way around the outside edges, and now I'm going to lay my frame right there in the middle. And now all I have to do is fold over my tissue paper. And because I've added the glue to that extra lip, when I fold this over, that glue will glue itself to the tissue paper on the inside edge. And suddenly what I have is a plane. Now I just went and I cut the tissue paper right here where my main fuselage comes back. Okay. And it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be exactly smooth, but I've got this extra piece. I'll come in with scissors and I'll cut it off. Doesn't matter. It's not about being perfect. Now I look at this and I see there's some areas where I didn't get enough glue or my glue wasn't close enough to the edge. So what do? Come back in, add a little glue, fold it over. I'll do that on both sides just to make sure that it's going to sort of sit. I really missed a spot back here. Not a big deal again. Push that down. Do the same thing here. And missed a spot up there. So we'll add a little bit more glue there, push that down. So now what do I have? I have a glider wing. Okay. And once again, because we have pipe cleaners in the front, it's going to go from being almost perfectly flat or anhedral to being very bent or having a dihedral, which will help you with your stability. Okay. So we've got our main body. Now we need to add our tail. So I'm going to come back, grab this guy. And if I go back to my scrap tissue paper, I see, well, I've got this piece. It's kind of a good shape. And I'm just going to lay this on here and say, well, it's like, well, I want something that's going to sort of complete this triangle. And I'm going to look at this and see, it's like, well, how can I work this out so it completes that triangle? I don't have a piece of frame here, so that's going to make it a little harder. So I'm going to maybe bend this up a little narrower and just sort of see what can I do to cover it. Well, I could do something like that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it the easiest way that I know how. I'm going to take and I'm going to add glue to a big chunk of this piece of tissue paper. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to sort of lay this on it. And I'm going to say, hey, that's good. And I'm going to fold this piece over just like that. And then maybe I'm going to add a little glue up here, fold this down a little. Well, no, that's not working out the way I want it to. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to cut that off. Because again, doesn't matter. I look down here and I can say, it's like, well, if I fold this up, pull that tight and fold it up, I'm kind of getting sort of a third layer. I'm basically making the tissue paper a little thick, which is fine for what we're doing here. It's actually going to add just enough rigidity to your tail here that it should work out pretty well. Look at this. Well, hey, look, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to add some more glue. Once again, this isn't about being perfect. This is about prototyping or creating your own design. And all I'm doing is I'm sort of folding this over. If I get a little flap that's loose, well, guess what? I add a little bit of glue, fold it up, and suddenly I have this to use as kind of my rudder. Now, come back to here, and I've got this tail. And remember, we split this earlier, and you notice hopefully why I didn't attach these earlier, because it would have been much harder. So I'm going to slide this in. And I'm going to look at it and say, it's like, well, is my tail vertical? So I'm going to make some adjustments. And, I don't want it laying off here. Maybe I want it straight up. Okay. And then as simple as grabbing another little piece of Scotch tape. That's actually way too much Scotch tape, but hey, we'll survive. And then wrapping it around. And suddenly we have a really basic tissue paper glider. Okay. And this is what's really nice is that you can play with this and do all sorts of things. Now, a couple of things to note on this. Obviously, we don't have any ailerons. We have what could be turned somewhat into a rudder based on how it's angled with our vertical fin in the back, but we don't have any elevators in the back. So we're not going to have anything to adjust our elevators and really look at how it's moving up and down. So there are lots of ways you can adjust this. You could add another straw to add a pair of elevators out. You could add a second flap to build a real rudder. And remember that one of the big things is that you can take it from flat up to a good dihedral to increase that stability to keep it from rolling as much. So this is a real quick video how to build one of these basic trash bag or tissue paper gliders out of just some random stuff you may have laying around. And once again, it's all about trying something new and prototyping. It's what works for you based on what you have. They're not going to be pretty, and that's fine. It's really about testing to see what works best for you in what you've got laying around.